Hello, this is Tim, and today we're going to go over the basic setup of a Cisco 3750 series switch. And this is true for really any switch, and in some cases routers too. So here I have the lab switch, and the first thing I'm going to go over is just this show version command. If we look at the top, we'll see the operating system image name and its current version. Also on this, you can see the uptime, which is important for troubleshooting. You can see where the image is stored at and what the exact image file name is. Well, it's not that slash, it's this one. Okay, then we'll go further on down. And we'll see the exact model of the switch. We'll see how many ports are on that. It's really 24. And we'll fix that later. And it's really just 2 gigabit Ethernet interfaces. And we'll fix that later. This is the base Ethernet MAC address. So all your MAC addresses for your physical interfaces will begin with this, with the first one being 01 and then 02 and then etc. through hexadecimal counting. And one more thing on this section, the system serial number, in case you need it. In here we can see it is switch 1 with 26 ports. And then just a few other things. Okay, this section down here is for the stackwise. Stackwise is when you connect multiple switches together with what's called a stackwise cable. It's a cable in the back. And with that, you're able to create one virtual switch. And so you have one command line that controls, one interface, I should say, that controls all the ports at once. And they're identified by this number. So that could be switch 1, and then you'll see switch 2 and switch 3. Okay, moving on. I'm going to go into privilege exec mode here. Whoops. And then let's look at the configuration real quick. So show run. Okay, and the first thing we see here is switch 1 provision and switch 4 provision. So it's, for some reason, on this switch, it has this in its command line, when in reality it should just have one of these. In this case, I want to make it switch 1. However, I'm just going to show you how to change it to switch 4, and then we'll switch it back to switch 1, because your switch may say some other number. So right now, I'm going to do show IP interface brief, and you'll see this is switch 1, so the interface is going to begin with 1. However, you'll see the conflict here very quickly. See how these ones begin with 4? This switch is not stacked. This is just one switch. If it was stacked, I can do show stack. And it really doesn't tell me anything. It's show stack members, I think. No, it's show stack. Well, I guess it's not that command. Okay, let me try again. It's show switch, and then I'll show you a few other options you can do. You can use the question mark for context sensitive help. And in this case, I'm just going to do stack ports. And this proves that switch 1, port 1 and port 2, because there are 2 ports in the back for stack wise, are both down, so it's not connected to anything. Okay, so the first command I'm going to do is go into config T, and then I'm going to do switch 1. And we have a couple other options. You can set the priority of a switch, provision and renumber, but I'm not going to go over stackwise right now. That'll be in a separate video. I'm just going to do a renumber, and then what I want to name it, I'll name it 4. And then I'll hit enter. And then yes, I want to continue. I just want to save the configuration just in case something that I need to save. And then to reboot the switch, it's just a simple reload command. And now we wait. Okay, the switch is rebooted now. Let's go ahead and erase the configuration of the switch. But before I do that, I'm going to do, that's not going to work. There we go. Do show run. I'm going to show this is still here. So let me delete show IP interface brief. You see it still looks the same. However, if I do show, let's do just show version. So we've seen that before. Now it says switch 4. So that's how you change it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this from being switch 4 completely. So let's go over how to purge that. I'm going to do the same command before, switch 4 renumber 1. Yes, I want to confirm or continue, and then save the configuration, which is WR, which is shorthand for write mem, and I'll do a few other iterations as time progresses. So I'm going to reboot it one more time, and then we're going to get rid of that line in that configuration. It'll be switch 1, and all the IP addresses will, or the IP addresses, the interfaces will show it being is 1. You don't see 4 there anymore. Okay, the switch is rebooted, and let's continue on with getting rid of what I wanted to get rid of. Just do a quick show run. So now I'm going to go into config T, which is called global configuration mode, and then I'm just going to do no, and then to make my life easy, copy and paste it. Now look what happens when I try doing it with the other one. It says it can't be unprovisioned when it's physically present. Alright, so now I'm going to save the configuration. Now if I do a show run again, you'll see it's gone. And then let's do show IP interface brief. Now let's look at the interfaces. That's it. So that's how you get rid of that. You may or may not have to do that, but you never know. Okay, moving on. Let me erase the configuration. So there's a few ways of doing this. we can do right erase. And then reload. And let me pause it. Okay, the switch is booted back up and we are greeted with, do I want to enter the initial configuration dialog? Always select no. And here we can see that it's no longer asking me for a password. If I do a show run, you'll see it's got nothing at all. Okay, now let's look at something else real quick. Show VLAN. Now I thought I erased the configuration. Well, I did. However, the VLAN database is on a separate file. So if we look at the file, which is just dir, you'll see this file right here called vlan.dat. Now how to solve this problem is to just simply delete the file. And now it's gone. Now I have to reload it one more time. But before I do that, I'm going to save the configuration. So another option is copy, running config, and then startup config. That copies it from the running config to the startup config because the running is stored in RAM. So once it reboots or loses power or whatever, it's gone. But the startup config is stored in NVRAM or non-volatile RAM. And that will stay persistent even on reboots and power losses and etc. etc. Just like a hard drive except memory, a different type of memory. Okay, so that saves it. And then I'm just going to reload it. Okay, we're back. The switch is rebooted, and let's do, oh, come on, there we go. Let's do show VLAN once again, and what do we have? No VLANs, they're gone. Alright, so that is how you get rid of that. Now we're going to set up what's called in-band management access. In-band because I will be using the same connection that production traffic uses, the same physical connection that production traffic uses to manage the switch. First thing we do is go into enable mode or privilege exec mode, as Cisco likes to call it. And let's just look at my interfaces real quick. Show IP interface brief. We have VLAN 1 as an interface, although that's a virtual interface. And then there are all my fast Ethernet interfaces. So right now, fast Ethernet 101 has a physical connection to my lab switch. So I'm going to configure that connection to use management. Now the first thing I need to do is go into the VLAN 1 configuration. And if I want to look at that, how it is right now, it's just show run interface VLAN 1. However, that won't work like that because I have to type the do command. Do is just shorthand, so I don't have to exit out of this and then get back into it out of the interface configuration mode. So I just type do. See, there is no IP address. So let's put an IP address on this. Whoops, I'm already in it. It's IP address or add. And then 192, whatever I want my IP to be. And then the subnet, which is just that. And that's it. As far as configuring that, let's see if it works. I can go and here we go. So here are my options. I can do SSH2, all these other ones. I want to set up SSH2. Alright, so I just can't SSH to it right now. There's a couple other steps that have to be done. So let me exit and go back here. Now, by default, SSH version 2 is not enabled. So that has to be enabled. And that command is IP SSH, I can type version, and then it tells me what version. Now I'm already on version 2, but I'm going to go to version 1 and then I'll revert back. So now I can do show IP SSH. And it tells me it's on version 1.5. Okay, now I'll just up arrow and I'll change version 1 to version 2. Up arrow again. And now you can see it's on version 2. Version 2 is the latest and greatest. Okay. Now the next step is to create a AAA model. So it's 8. Now I already have one configured, but it's not a big deal. I'm just going to override it. AAA new model. That's your first step. And your next step is it's a crypto key, generate, what is it? RSA, general keys, modulus, and then there are some options here. If I use context sensitive help, I can see here are my options. So 2048 is the highest this software image will allow. And here's the problem. It says I must do a domain name first. So that's easy. IP domain name. That's what it's telling me to do. And then I'll just tell it DarkEnterprises.com. Okay, now let's type this command again. And now I wait for it. Okay, I'm back. And the key is done generating. Great. Let's give this switch a name other than just switch. So it's going to be lab CSW27. Okay, what this means is lab because this is my lab. C for Cisco. SW for switch, and 27 is the console port on my terminal server that the console port on the switch is connected to. I have a 48 port console server or terminal server, either or. Anyways, it's on port number 27, so that's just easy for me to remember. Okay, let me save this configuration. Now I need to go into line VTY 0 through, depending on your image, depends how many line numbers you have. In this case, I got 15. Now there's something I need to set is this command called transport input. And now there's a few options that I can type. SSH and Telnet, Or I could say none, meaning nobody can log in to this thing except through a console connection. However, anyways. And now I have to do one more thing. I have to do an enable password. So enable, and I can either type password. I can spell it. There we go. Which is an unencrypted password. Or I can type secret, which encrypts it with the MD5 algorithm. So enable secret, and then I'll just type Cisco. Now, one last piece of this puzzle. This is the very last thing you have to do. Not necessarily in the order you have to do it. I mean, you can pretty much do this stuff in any order you want. I have to give it a username. So let's do a username, Dirg, and then again I can either type password or secret. And then what the password is, which is just going to be Cisco. Now let me save this. Now come over to my connect dialog. I've already set it up here. I'm just going to reconnect. And let's see if it works. Wants my password. And there we have it. I'm in the switch. It's done. So that's how to set up out-of-band access, or excuse me, in-band access to the switch. And the next thing you want to do before you connect this switch to any other device that is Cisco, that's a Cisco switch, you want to change the VTP mode to transparent. However, before we do that, we have to give it a domain name. Not an IP domain name, a VTP domain name. So VTP, and then it's just going to be domain name, but here are a few other options. So a domain, and then what I want to call it. Just the same thing. It really doesn't matter. It only matters when you connect it to other switches and you want them to communicate through the same VLANs. Even though they don't propagate information from each other with this very next command, which is VTP mode, and then there are just a few modes here. Client, off, server, transparent. I'm not going to go over what any of those mean in this video, but we're just going to use transparent. Well, I'll just tab it out. And that's it. Now what transparent means is this switch won't write to any other switch what its VLANs are automatically. Why is that a problem? Because if I have a brand new switch and I've been testing it out in my lab and I accidentally forget to delete the VLAN file, and this switch is, let's say I was playing around with server. Server means, hey, you're going to use my information. Anybody that's a client, that their mode is set to client, the server will say, hey, you're going to use these VLAN configurations. So I take this switch that I had in my lab and I just plug it up to production, forget to delete that VLAN file, the VLAN.dat file. Next thing I know, this switch overwrites all other switch VLANs configurations in production. So yeah, that's the problem. Cisco's recommendation is set everything to VTP transparent mode. Don't use any of the other options. Unless you have a compelling reason to use those options, don't. Okay, so with that being said, this switch is now safe to plug into your production network without fear of it overriding any other VLAN configurations you have. Now, on the topic of VLANs, let's create some VLANs. I'm just going to create a couple of them here. So the first one will be just VLAN 10, and then I'm just going to give it a name. We'll just call it marketing. Capitalize because I know I created it. And then VLAN 20, let's just call this one sales. Okay, now I can just simply do show VLAN oh, that's something else. Yeah, so you see it doesn't do VLAN 20. Why it doesn't see it? Because you need to exit out of that VLAN configuration after you create it. Only the first time. Now I can type that same command again, show VLAN, and there you see VLAN 20 shows up. So if you don't see your VLAN, exit out of the VLAN configuration. Now one other option for creating VLANs if you want to create a lot of VLANs is 30, 40, 50, whatever numbers you want that are allowed, and I'll show you how to look at that here in a second. Now I just need to exit out of that, and I can do, do show VLAN, and here you can see the different VLANs that were configured. You have 30, 40, and 50. And then you can go back into each one and give them a name. Okay. One other thing about VLANs. How can we delete a VLAN? Well, that's easy. It's just no VLAN 30. So do show VLAN again. 30's gone. That's how you delete a VLAN. It's that easy. Okay, now I want to save this. Notice up here the ports are all associated with VLAN 1. Let's associate some ports with VLAN 10 and VLAN 20. These are simple commands. I'm just going to do interface range because I want multiple ports at once and I don't want to have to go into each individual interface configuration. 1 or 2 isn't bad, but when you do 48 of them or hundreds of them at once, then it gets really tedious if it's the same exact configuration. I can just do interface range, and then it's fast Ethernet, and then we'll just do 0, /2 through 10. It's that easy. Now I just do, forget the V, switch port switch port mode access. This is the first command you have to type for VLAN configuration. And then the next one is to say, hey, what VLAN do you belong to? So switch port access VLAN 10. Now, if we do show VLAN, I'm just going to do another command here called ID10, and this is only going to show me VLAN 10. Here you can see all the ports are in VLAN 10. Now I'm going to go to the next set of ports. Let's do 11 through 20. I'm going to use the up arrow to make my life easy. Well, let's show you this first. What happens when I do this? I do this command before I do the mode command. Nothing. So you can do that either way. That comes important when you do trunk ports though. But I'm not going to go over that right now. And change the mode to access. And now I'll just type the same command again, except 20. And here you see 11 through 20 are all in VLAN 20. Here you go. Okay, now port 1 I left alone because that's going to be my management port. So that's going to stay in VLAN 1. Now let's change port 1's configuration. But before I do that, I'm just going to type N and that'll get me back here instead of having to type exit a couple of times. I'm going to do show run or show running config. And I'm going to skip over some of this stuff. Up here, it shows a little latency because I'm going through the console connection. So I'm going to, no, not the console connection, because I'm recording this and I'm using bandwidth over my, I don't know, it's the computer. Anyways, VLAN 10 and 20, you can see here. And then here you can see this doesn't have a VLAN defined because that is a default configuration. With a few exceptions, all default configurations will not be shown. But here you can see the configuration for these ports. VLAN 10 and then VLAN 20. And if I do show run, and let's just begin it, and so this is kind of just a shortcut through the configuration so I don't have to space through everything. Here you can see the interface configured. This stuff, well, this right here should be deleted, but I'm not worried about that in my lab. This allows all connections. Well, I already went over that. And that's basically the configuration. It's really not anything complicated. Now with VLANs, I can't just communicate with my computer here with anything on VLAN 10 or VLAN 20 or any other VLAN except VLAN 1. My computer would have to be on the same port as VLAN 10 or VLAN 20 or whatever other device I'm trying to connect to, whatever that VLAN is. Now the next thing I want to do is set up a trunk port. So I'm going to do this with just a few commands. Now a trunk, instead of an access, is just one VLAN per port allowed. No other exceptions except a voice VLAN. You can hook a phone. But anyways, With a trunk port, I can have multiple VLANs over the same port. So let me do that. This is my port I want to change, and I'm going to do switch port. Now, I can't just do mode trunk. It's not going to work. It'll yell at me. Here, I'll prove it to you. It yells at me. It says, oh, you can't do that. You need to set the encapsulation. All right, well, that's an easy command. Switch port, encapsulation. Switch port, oh, excuse me. Switch port trunk, I can spell. Encapsulation. There's a few options, but really we're just going to do DOT1Q. And that's it. There's nothing else I can do. Okay, with that being said, I can go back to this previous command, switch port mode trunk. And now I made it a trunk port. But it kicked me out. Why did it kick me out? Because, let's go back to the console. And let's figure out what the because is. I'm going to type show interface trunk. This is going to... And here we can see the mode is on. It's using native VLAN 1. And it's allowing all VLANs. Well, that's interesting. If it's allowing all VLANs, why isn't it working? Let's go look at the... Too far. Let's look at this configuration. So the port it's on, do show run interface 013. Oops, because it's not a fast Ethernet interface. It's a gigabit. Is not set up for a trunk. So let's change that real quick. So switch ports, trunk, encapsulation, DOT1Q. Now switch port mode trunk. Now what I like to do is just shut the port and no shut the port. And then I could go back here and I'll do the same. This just resets both ports. Now what you would normally do is you would shut down both ports. You would do the configuration and then you would no shut the ports. So you would enable the ports. And then you wouldn't have to go through all this conversion process back and forth as you're typing commands and you get all this stuff populate on your screen. None of that happens while the ports are shut down. But this is a lab and it's fun to see how things, see what things occur. Okay, it looks like it's back up. Well, let's look at this. Well, we know this side has a trunk port. We know that side has a trunk port. Let's see if I can reconnect. I have to disconnect my session. And then, did it work? Yeah. And then reconnect. And I'm back. So that's how you set up trunk port. Now, on that trunk, you can do a few things. We can do switch port, trunk, And then I'll show you a few commands here. Native, which means all untagged, yes, it's a technical term that I'm going to go over. All untagged traffic or packets will get tagged with the native VLAN. In other words, if a packet comes through and it didn't originate from a VLAN 10 or a VLAN 20 or any other VLAN, then what the native VLAN is set at, then it will get tagged whatever the native VLAN is. Okay. The native VLAN by default is 1. And we saw that with this command up here when I did show interface trunk. If you look up here at the top, native VLAN 1. Now that can be changed. I'm not going to change it because if I change it, the computer I'm on is on VLAN 1. So it won't be able to communicate. So I'm going to do a switch port trunk allowed. And then I'm going to say VLAN. And then I have a few options here. If I was appending to the list, I would use the keyword add. If I wanted to replace the list, I can just type the VLANs I want. That's what this means up here. Whoops. That's what this means. I just type the VLANs I want. If I want to remove some of the VLANs from the list, but not all of them, then I would use the keyword remove. If I want to allow no VLANs, of course, it's just the word none. If I allow all of them, I can just type all. Right now, it defaults to all, which you saw in the previous command when I did the show interface trunk. And of course, there's a few other keywords here, but they don't really matter right now. So I'm just going to replace this with 1, 10, and 20. Those are the only VLANs that are going to be allowed over that interface. And you just use a comma with no spaces between all the numbers. Now if I type this command again, show interface trunk, whoops, ambiguous meaning there's more than one possibility. Okay. Now the only VLANs allowed on the trunk are 1, 10, and 20. That's it. There are no other options. If we come up here, just going to scroll up, you'll see VLANs allowed on the trunk. All VLANs. There are 4,094 possible VLANs you can use. There's a few that I'm not going to go over VLANing concepts. I'm not going to go over that. There's a few that you can't use. So we'll just keep it simple and just use, the first 4,094. Anyways, now this side's a trunk too. Let's look at the show interface trunk command for this one. It allows all my VLANs. So it's just going to allow everything willy-nilly. Okay. Let's change that. Switch port, trunk, allowed, VLAN, one comma 10, 20. Now we'll see the same output. And now they're matching on both sides. You want them matching. If they're not matching, things will break. You may see stuff working, like here. You saw both sides were still communicating and never lost any packets or anything. Because one side allowed everything, one side said, I'm only allowing these VLANs. So just for, common sense and best practices, make both sides matching. Now there's one step further that we can do on that, but I'm not going to go over that here. And that's the different type of trunking modes. I'm definitely not going over that. So as far as what can we do with the switch from here? I can take a virtual machine in my lab, plug it up to this switch, assign it to that one of those ports that are in VLAN 10, and then I could take another virtual machine, do the same thing in the same VLAN, and those two guys can communicate with each other. They'll have no problems whatsoever. And I think I will do that in another video. I will show how to do that, because this video is getting kind of long. We're at almost an hour right now. And I'm just going to think for a minute. I'm going to pause it and see if there's anything else that I want to show. Okay, I thought of something that can be a time saver. If you're working with a configuration and it's a baseline configuration, now we're talking lab, you should save that configuration as a different name. So with the previous command that I typed, which was copy, running config, now there's some other options here. Wow, there are a lot of options. Well, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy it from the running configuration to a file. So I'm going to label it flash, and then what do I want to call it? I'm going to call it, and we'll call it base config 1.txt. And then yes. Okay. Now it's saved that. Okay. What can I do with that? Well, I can actually load that file. But let's make some changes before I do that. Let's say, let's change the host name to temp. Sure. Why not? That's a simple configuration. Let's do another one. Interface range F102 through 24. Let's shut all those ports down. Yeah, there we go. That's a drastic configuration change. Now let me save that. I'm just going to use write mem to save it. Okay, now if I do show IP interface brief, they're all administratively down, meaning I shut them down. Okay, bear with me. I got to remember the exact syntax, but I think it's configure replace. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. Replace and you'll see it's asking me, what file do you want to use to replace the running configuration? I want to use flash com, and I'll question mark it. And then I will say, what was it called? Base config one.text. And I have a few other options. If I want to list it, it's just gonna, you know, I think it's common sense on what that stands for. And there's a few other ones here. But all I'm going to do is just hit enter. Am I sure I want to proceed? Yes. Just give it a minute to churn. It rolled back everything. It's going through its process here. There's my prompt. There you go. Now you can have a base configuration file stored on your switch. You can even copy this, which I'll go over in another video. But you can copy this stuff to an FTP server and just start saving it. So show IP interface brief. And you see now they're down. They're not administratively down. So my configurations are all back to normal. Now one last thing I want to show. Notice when I go into this mode and I say, well, I really, this is all I need to do. And I exit out of it. Where does it put my cursor? It puts it at the end of the current line. Well, that's kind of annoying, isn't it? Well, let's fix that. I'm just going to hit enter. It doesn't matter. Because now it's like, I don't know what you want to do. So I can go into line con 0 or VTY or anything. But anyways, logging synchronous. And now look what happens. It automatically creates a new line for me. That's a pretty handy command. Okay, well this will conclude this video. Thank you for watching and I hope this has been helpful. Have a great day.